Welcome to everybody. Today is our work from home, work remote strategies webinar, and we're going to do 2 tools. Hi, Eileen.
Hello. Good to be here today.
I'm really excited about today. So you and I use tools all the time. And I don't know if people know this as much, but in coaching, we have tools, models, frameworks. We have these different patterns. We have scenarios that we walk people through. And it's kind of to get them out of a rut or get them out of something in their head. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are things that come up regularly that sometimes on the spot as coaches will say, you know, hey, try this out. And that might be a tool we create on the spot or a framework or something. And then there are some consistent ones that we use all the time. So today I have one that is positive psychology based that a lot of us use. And then I have one that I kind of just a framework that I've put together that's simple. I'm huge on simple. So it's things that you could do in the moment on the spot. And so just how I lead clients through a certain situation, which I don't want to give that away yet. So
let's start with this. For the first thing that we'll be exploring, the first tool that we'll be exploring, when you think about situations that leaders are in that you're coaching, what are some of their stress points for which the tool that you're about to present to us is useful? What are some of the things that they come to you with?
Yeah, absolutely. So for this particular tool, it is when they feel, I'm going to call it fixed thinking. It's hard to think of a situation in another way. So something happens and your mind is just like, oh my gosh, and it starts to spiral in a direction you don't want to go, or you can't think differently. It comes up like that. It also, and so that's where I'm working with someone and it's happening with them. I'll also be working with a client who will talk to me about someone who's on their team, who they're managing, who's having a hard time looking through a different lens. And so we'll use this tool and I'll say, try this tool with your team and see how it works and how it can open up. And one of, actually, you might even ask me this question, but one of my very favorite comments I got, someone texted me after I introduced this tool to them. They said, and can I share the name of the tool already?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so it's ABC+DE, and I'm gonna go over that in a minute. But he sent me a text and he said, ABC righted my day. And it can totally take a day that can go down a path you don't want to be on and just shift it with something that you have control over. So that's where people use it most is, I don't like where I'm going with this. How can I shift my thinking?
So if people feel stuck or they feel fixed, they just can't get out of their own minds. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep. And thank you for saying stuck. Stuck is a perfect word to describe it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so take us there. So somebody feels stuck, they're working with you, they're in a coaching session with you. What is this ABC+DE tool and how do you introduce it to someone?
Absolutely. So, and I'm going to give an example too, that's a simple example so that you can see it. I think sometimes it's hard when you get a tool and you're like, okay, how's that play out? And it's funny, with both the tools I picked, usually I invite all current and past clients to join on these webinars, and a lot of people end up coming who I've worked with. I didn't even share it with them. I thought it's gonna be so repetitive because these are things I use all the time. So I'm super excited to share with people who might not know. So first thing I'm gonna ask you to do is horizontally across the top, if you have a piece of paper with you, write ABC+DE. So that's just gonna be kind of the framework that we'll be using. Then vertically, let's take the A and you're going to write activating event. And I'll go over all of this in a moment. Then right below the A, you're going to have your B. And that's going to be belief. Then you're going to go to the next one and C, that's going to be your consequence. And or consequences. What next to consequences in parentheses, you can put feelings and actions. And if you go right up to belief, actually in parentheses, put thoughts. So you've got activating event, your belief, which is your thoughts, and then your consequences, your feelings or your actions. Now we get to D and E, and that's dispute with evidence. So that's the framework for this. And if you think about it, if you have a belief that really works for you and you feel like, I feel great about this, it's fine, you don't need to go through this process. So the beliefs are really those negative beliefs, the negative thought patterns that keep us stuck, keep us in a place we just don't want to be. So walking through this could be a situation where maybe you're in a meeting and something comes up and you're like, that doesn't feel right. You might use it there, or it might be you leave a situation where you feel like someone just punched you in the gut, and it could be that visceral. So it really works for a range of situations. So I'm going to take one that actually has come up not too long ago with a client of mine, a similar kind of situation, just because I think it'll be easy to see. So let's say you have an activating event, and that might be you've sent your manager a text or a email saying, hey, I'd love to discuss X, Y, and Z with you. No response. So you don't get a response that day. You don't get a response the next day. Maybe 2 or 3 days go by. This is not typical. You're sitting there, and now you're left with your beliefs or your thoughts. So Senya, help me out on some beliefs or thoughts. You get 0 response. So what would you?
And especially since you say it's not typical. So I would think my manager hates this idea. I might think the manager's too busy with some coronavirus or sort of immediate thing. So I could think this was a lousy idea. Not only that the manager hates it, but actually, why did I even present it? Do you need more?
Yeah, no, that's great. You might even think, and this is that going back to Corona, this Corona, cloud over us. It's like, oh gosh, I know we're doing budget cuts. I wonder if I'm going to lose my job. And so she's silent because I'm going to lose my job, and she doesn't want to engage me now. So absolutely. These are some typical beliefs that you can go through the pattern with. And some of you might be sitting there going, no, she's just busy. That's a great thought process, but let's take this process, which is very common. So now you've got your consequence, which are your feelings and actions. So let's take this. I might lose my job. She hates me. She doesn't like what I sent, whatever the case is. How do you feel after that? Going through those beliefs and
lousy, especially when I compare it to the fact that she had replied to me fast in the past. So bad and doubtful of myself, doubtful of what I'm doing with that question or that idea that I said, but also in other things as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then an action might be, I am not sending another email that's proactive. And so I'm going to just retreat, which that doesn't tend to get us in the place we want us to be. So yeah, we beat ourselves up, we retreat, we start to think about, why should I even be here? I'm not good enough. It's all those things. And then we have actions that don't necessarily serve us well. So now comes in the D and E. So disproving with evidence. So what you want to do on your vertical line is take an arrow for disproving with evidence and bring that arrow up to the belief. That's what we're going to be disproving with evidence, is our thoughts. And so what it looks like is you could find evidence for what you have, what your thought process, or evidence against. So in this case, what might be some evidence that we can say against us thinking she hates me, I'm getting fired, I'm, that spiral? What might be some things that we can?
I don't know if this is accurate, but she might not have gotten the email, or she might have gotten the email when she was standing in a line somewhere, and so she didn't return to it again. I don't know if that's accurate, but I just know it's possible that she read it in a situation in which she had to do something else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a different way to look at, something else could have happened. Perhaps she's homeschooling 10 kids, and she's trying to also keep afloat, right? So the mind is in a million areas. Perhaps there are going to be budget cuts, and she's in these meetings that are intense. You're not on the line, but that's where her focus is right now, and she'll circle back. Perhaps it's lost in a sea of emails. There's a million other ways to look at a different thought process. And then what does that do to your consequence, how you feel about yourself, if you're able to look at it through that lens?
It's not about me.
It's not about you.
This could be not about me. It could be about her 10 homeschooled kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the consequence is, my self-esteem's intact, my confidence is intact, my engagement with our organization, I still feel valued. She just missed a text that I sent, or I keep saying text, it's probably more of an email.
And to what you had said at the action might be to withdraw before, when I thought, oh, she didn't like it, this isn't right, she's going to fire her whole team or me. But now if I think she didn't get it or she was really busy, I might actually very well send a reminder, or hey, this might have dropped through the cracks. So completely opposite action.
Absolutely. And even not, she didn't bring it up in this context, but I know when you were interviewing Margaret Greenberg and she talked about the double tap, you might want to do an extra tap, right? You know, hey, I know you're swamped and I know you've got a lot of other things going on, checking in to see if we can get a meeting to talk about X, Y, and Z, or what have you. But Zoom is our only way right now that a lot of us are connecting. And so our mind can really play some games with us because we're not passing in the halls. We can't just pop into somebody's office. So we do need to be a little bit more proactive in reaching back out if something falls through the cracks. So that is how you disprove a faulty belief with some evidence. And then you could do evidence for. So if you feel like, well, I haven't shown up for work for the last year and I never follow through, and then you might have some evidence on your side that there's a problem, right? So mostly you're going to disprove with, you know what, let me just kind of zoom out of this, no pun intended, but zoom out and figure out, is there another way to look at this? So I had told Senya that I'm not going to have any props or tools, but of course I thought there is one, and it's actually a good one for both this tool and the next. Have sunglasses or glasses always on your desk so you remember to look through a different lens. No joke. That will remind you to, is there another lens that I can look through? And so that's the shortcut on this. So if someone were to say, well, Ilene, do you always go through all these steps and disprove with evidence? I don't. I'll be totally honest, but I always do. When I start to go down a path, I feel like this feels icky, it doesn't feel good. I always ask myself, how else can I view this situation? And that's my shortcut. So if you can just say that, put on different lenses and think, well, gosh, she could be this, I could be that, this could be happening, all these things, you've now shortcutted and you feel very different than you did when you made the original assumptions.
I've just posted that from the comments, that here's a tool, it's a big tool, but also here's a shortcut. How else can I think about it? Kind of going right back to the belief and just putting in that moment. That's an awesome shortcut, because sometimes it takes an effort to, what's my activating event? What is the belief? But really, how else can I be thinking about it?
Exactly. And that's what we do as coaches a lot with our clients. You know, if somebody comes to us with an issue, then we'll say, well, how else might you look at this situation? Yeah. What other lens can you see this through? And so that's what will help you when you're working with someone. And it's also a question you can ask yourself in the moment. Yeah. And for those who are familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, this is has definite roots in cognitive behavioral therapy. So.
Shall we go on to tool number 2?
Let's do it. Okay.
All right, so Ilene has 2 tools for us, and I asked her specifically, Ilene, for this next tool that you're about to share, what is the situation in which someone should use this tool, either on themselves or something that they can do with somebody else that they care about?
Absolutely. So this one is, I'm calling it, and this is the one that I've made up in terms of my terminology, it's collaborative conversation framework. And this has come up a lot recently with a variety of clients this week, or actually in the last couple of weeks. It's my work, and Senya, you probably too, it kind of goes in themes. Like I've had major themes around this. And so this is when you're going to have a difficult conversation, when you maybe aren't necessarily having a difficult conversation, but you want to present something that you're hoping the other person might jump on board with you. It might be you have someone who's reporting into you who you have to have a tough conversation with around, you know, you're never showing up on time, or this project needs X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. So it kind of can have a variety of situations. It's also a great personal tool to use as well. And so it's basically what you do. It's a simple framework. You start with the end, and I'll explain this again. Start with the end, then you go to your start, then you go to your middle. So end, start, middle. That is the framework that I always have clients when they come. I worked with someone on negotiations recently, and then somebody else who wanted to add head count. This is how we laid it all out. Start with the end. What do you want as your goal for the meeting? So often we forget that. We forget where we want to even land. So it's very hard to have a constructive meeting if you don't know where you want to land. So what's your end goal? That's where we're starting with the end. This is the piece people forget. Look through, this is the tie to my other one. Look through the other lens. Who are you talking to and what is their lens? Because if you haven't considered what they're thinking, where their mind is in what you're presenting, it's going to be very hard to have a collaborative conversation and to get them on board. If it's all about, this is what I want, this is what I need. Even in a negotiation, I worked with someone on a negotiation there was a salary issue situation. And so I said, what's in it for them? Always ask what's in it for them and how is this in their best interest as well? Because as humans, we often look through that lens. So that's the end. How do you want that person to feel if you're going in an interview? What do you want them to think about? How do you want them to view you when you walk out of, oh no, I just got, sorry, my screen just went off. So if you are going into an interview, how do you want them to leave thinking about you? That's where you start, okay? What do you want them to think? Where do you want them to be? What's your end goal? So the takeaways. Now let's go to the start. So we've got our goal. Let's create that roadmap. What does the roadmap look like to get to that end goal that you want? So with that, you want to think about, again, what's in it for them? So when you think about what's in it for them, you also want to think about what's in it for the company if you're proposing something for the company. And I just had a client, we were working on this, and she had an awesome meeting with her boss. And during this, we also talked about what are some obstacles that you're getting into his thinking. So what might come up for him where he says, this isn't going to work, because you already want to think that through, right? Because you want to know how is he thinking? Okay. So what's in it for the other person? What's in it for the team? What's in it for the company? And then this is a piece that people really forget. 2 to 3 things max in a meeting. So if you're going into a tough conversation with somebody or just a conversation, don't bring up more than 3 things. Ideally stick to 1 or 2 if it's really important, because our brains, it's overload. How many times do you short circuit in a meeting where it's like all this stuff is coming at you? So if you have something important to say, keep it to that. And if there's more to do, set up another meeting. So I'm not saying don't discuss it, but focus in on what you need to talk about that's really important. So if you have a proposal, at the very beginning of your meeting, you're going to say, I want to cover these 2 things. At the end, I would love us to get to a place where we can move forward in this way. Okay. Again, this is how we do it as coaches. We say, what do you want to focus in on and where do you want to be when we end? This is what you're going to want to do in this end, start, middle. And then the middle piece is your collaborative piece. And that's when you collaborate with the person who you're working with. So one thing right off the bat, take why out of your vocabulary. I am not a fan of why. It puts us on our heels. So if you're going to be talking to, let's say you're having a management issue with somebody and you say, well, why are you always late? Immediately they're like this. And it's like, oh gosh, now I need to dig out of here to get back up, right? So instead, how can we work on you being on time? Are there some things that we might be able to tweak that will make it easier for you to attend X, Y, and Z? Or, you're working with somebody on a proposal. Why does the proposal include this? Right off the bat, it's like, I have to defend this. How about, I'm so curious. I see that you added this in and I would love to understand the thought process behind that. Very different feeling. So creating that collaborative environment and thinking, what do we want to see more of and how can we work together on that? So that's your middle. And then you're going to get to the end where you'll circle back to the beginning. As I mentioned, we wanted to talk about these things. I'm so glad we talked about X, Y, and Z. And what are each of our action steps to move forward or something like that. So you have some kind of action. The last thing I want to say on this, I just want to check our timing. Okay, last quick thing that has come up a lot with clients is being in a meeting where they feel like, in a one-on-one, they're talked over or it's taken in a tangent. That's what's beautiful about having this framework is you can right off the bat, when somebody takes you on a tangent, for example, this negotiation one, it was a perfect example where the person who she was working with often would kind of distract or go on a tangent. So we planned that out. We knew that would happen. Oftentimes it's a habitual thing with some people. And we said, okay, I really appreciate where you're going with this. And I would love to go back to the goal of the meeting, which is this. And then if we could discuss that more later, or after I finish this thought about A, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But it gives you kind of a home base to come to. There you go. So I'm hoping we're okay on time.
We're great. We're going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question on this, which I have now dubbed the CCF. So Ilene Schaffer's Collaborative Conversation Framework.
Love it.
The one question that we have for our audience when we're doing these is, what is your takeaway? Is your takeaway about the ABC+DE model, or is it about this collaborative conversation framework that goes end, start, middle? Please let us know, what is your takeaway? What can you use today, on Thursday, or this week? What can you use? So let us know that. And as you do, I'll be asking Ilene a follow-up question. Ilene, I understand the model. So this end, start with both your side and their side. So really just frame what's happening and what goal you want to reach. Then the start, which seems to be the roadmap and getting to the crux of it. And then the middle, which is collaborative.
Yep, absolutely.
And then you're saying, so the part that I wanted to clarify, and then you're saying at the time-wise, at the end, go back to your starting end, which is saying this was the goal. Now, what agreements do we have, if any, and what action steps do we have? Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. If possible, I would go back to that, because then you could say, this is what we set out to do. Are there any lingering things we want to meet further about? What actions can we each take on to move this forward? Yeah, and even so, for example, I was just working with someone on a proposal for more headcount. And so she went through the whole thing, and then we had talked about at the end, we knew that there was gonna be a budget issue, most likely. So what more information can we each find out so we can deal with the budget issue and move forward? So that brings you back to your beginning again.
So information can be an action.
Absolutely. What research do we need to do? What information do we need to compile? How can we move this along? I'm really sensitive to the budget. How can we move this forward?
So when coaches come up with their own frameworks, and we're a creative bunch, so we do this from time to time, I am very curious, how did you come to this framework, and specifically to the part that's kind of counterintuitive, moving the end to the beginning?
Yeah. You know, I think it keeps going back to the sunglasses of looking through a different lens, because when we get stuck on something, it's usually that we're just seeing it how I want. So for example, this client who I just worked on the more headcount, I said, before we meet, I want you to send to me, what are your goals, and how do you want to approach this? And she said, my goals are this because I want to grow professionally and this and that. So when I met with her, I said, that's all great. And what's in it for him? And what's in it for the company? And that's where you have to go to the end. You've got to look at the other lens and say, how do I want them to leave? And I do it a lot. I do interview prep with people quite often. And that is one of the key things I talk about is, what do you want them leaving with? Because that's your job to create that during your time together. So that's the end.
Yeah. So you're saying taking that other lens, like, again, it comes back to the sunglasses.
It's always taking the other lens of what do I want them to leave thinking, and how can I get in their head too? Because you are, like, for example, now if you're to ask for more headcount, a bonus, this, that, or the other thing, you know that companies are struggling and this, that, and the other thing. And so you really want to be sensitive, aware. And it might be having that conversation of, hey, I know you're under a lot of pressure right now with budgets and everything, and I'd love to have a conversation about how we could work towards an increase in my salary as things start to lift. Because then you're really sensitive to what's happening now, and I also want to advocate for myself. You want to advocate for yourself, but you want to do it in an effective way.
As we wrap up in our final moment, may I ask you to hold up the sunglasses when you're
Yes.
going to answer my last question, because they're relevant to both. They're relevant to the ABC+DE
They are, yeah.
and to this collaborative communication framework. What is, given both of these frameworks, what is something you'd like to leave our viewers with?
I would say, really, I would say that have the sunglasses on your desk and constantly be thinking about what other ways can I look at this, and what other ways might somebody else be looking at something. So kind of take it from both angles. Because the more we can expand our thinking, the easier it is for us to get unstuck and move forward.
Yay to getting unstuck.
Yes.
Yay to getting
Who wants to be stuck? And I think so many of us in the world we're in right now feel very, very stuck. And our whole world is requiring us to start to take off the lenses that we've always used and put on new lenses and understand our world in a totally different way than perhaps we have in the past.
What a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much, Ilene.
Thank you for having me, and have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. We're here every day at 11 a.m. Pacific for our 20 minutes plus 10 of Q&A. We look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much, Ilene.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.